So it's good to see you again after
Yeah,
it's been about a year, perhaps.
you're looking well considering
Uh,
the deadly heat wave you've been
oh,
going through.
I don't know what this deadly heat wave is. Now, it's been raining non-stop here for about 4 or 5 days. It's been about between 18 and 20 degrees. It's not July weather at all. And
Ah,
yesterday I was on a film shoot in Suffolk, and it pelted it down the entire day. We were cold. We were wet.
oh
And I
God.
keep looking at the news with all these red maps everywhere, and I'm thinking, where is this supposed to be? It's not here. It's
I
not
know,
here.
I don't know.
That's strange.
Anyway, yeah. I mean, occasionally you do have hot weather, but what about in Greece and Italy and places like that?
I talked to friends in Palermo, for example, in Sicily, and they said it wasn't that bad. Then
Yeah,
I saw something online. There was a funny thing on Twitter, and somebody said, "Look at the weather map we've just produced of Palermo with 40 degrees or 45 or whatever it was, and then go to the BBC weather app, the weather news. Sorry, then go to the BBC weather app to look at the actual recorded temperature in Palermo, and it was 35." And it was the same. It
oh,
happened in the same place, Greece, Palermo. And somebody told me that they've been recording ground temperature instead of air temperature.
oh God.
Yes.
Maybe they just want a bit of attention,
I don't
maybe.
know. They're certainly grabbing some headlines, but I've not experienced that heat wave. And I know some friends on the continent are also not experiencing this crazy heat wave. So it's a mystery. It's a real mystery.
Yeah,
Wrapped
I
inside,
gotta.
an
Yeah,
enigma,
yeah.
etc., etc.
Well, yeah, I got a friend in Phoenix,
Yeah.
Arizona, and according to our news here,
Mm.
they've had, I think they said 21 or 22 days over 43 degrees,
Okay.
which is what, 110.
110, yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but look, it's a hellhole at the best of times. It
Well,
damn near killed me
exactly.
last time I was there.
Exactly. You only got to add 2 or 3 degrees to Arizona, and that's all you need to tip the balance, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Um, uh,
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you, Tony. Go ahead.
no, it's all right. It's all right. Yeah.
Andy has a very when he's excited to speak to somebody, he talks about himself in the third person, obviously, but he's also
That's all
very
right.
very focused and very I find it very, very hard to not interrupt. And that's been my interviewer like with the hard learned lesson over the last 2 years. You're interviewing them, Andy. Let them speak. Because
Yeah.
for years I
Hey,
was the
look, I tell you.
interviewee.
Yeah. No, you're nowhere near as bad as some, I tell you,
Oh, good.
including me.
Okay.
If I'm interviewing someone, I practically tell them what to say. Oh, this is what you meant to say, I
Okay.
assume, you know.
Okay. Didn't you mean
Never mind.
1876? Is that okay?
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah.
Look, I've got the new
Hey,
book and it's signed, and
oh,
I
great,
really,
great.
really appreciate it.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And
I
now
like the cover.
I love the cover, but it's joined my collection of the other
Yeah.
books. So
Oh, yes,
yeah.
yes.
Mm.
Oh, good on you, mate. Look, thanks,
Well,
but I appreciate your words of encouragement.
I mean, it's I find myself in the opposition these days of rubbing shoulders with former heroes. You know, still heroes, but people that that encouraged me along the road to research, and that's a real privilege. This book is very interesting, and I think what really interested me is the simplicity of the setup,
Yeah,
the contents. Even when
yeah,
you go in there, you've got the colonial era, the early modern era, and the modern era with those dates, 1788, 1900, 1901, 1974, and 1975 to present. And what interested me about that is, of course, most of us Bigfooties would associate the history of the Yowie to the popularity of the North American Sasquatch, and that must be something that
yeah.
you have to a little trial that you have to work through with people all the time. So I would like
Mm.
to ask you, just starting with that colonial era, what is it about the reports in that era that indicate a hairy man and not some Aboriginal legend that we've co-opted into this modern phenomenon?
Hmm. Yes, well, I was interested in the colonial era, the very early reports, right from the beginning of my research back in the early to mid 1970s, because I suspected initially that someone here in Australia was just having flights of fancy and copying the American reports, as you might say, aping our American cousins, particularly the late Rex Gilroy. I thought, he must be, this can't be right. He was the first investigator of the modern era with Yowies, and he was a difficult man to talk to and rather unconvincing as a witness. So for a couple of years, I thought, he's just having he's latching on to the American Bigfoot phenomenon, plus having hallucinations. But turned out he was right. There is a long tradition of Australian British pioneers seeing yowies, and then of course the Aboriginal traditions going back to the year dot. So I was always keen to ferret out those colonial era reports just to reassure myself, because I thought, well, how on earth could we have such creatures here when they have them in Canada and the States, and apparently something pretty similar in the Himalayas. That's all I knew back then. So it was a while before I actually met and interviewed Yowie witnesses myself. In fact, it wasn't until after I'd returned from a 2-year expedition overseas chasing Sasquatches, Bigfoot, Yetis, and the Orang Mawas and other hairy men. And Paul Cropper came on the scene, at least in my awareness, in 1981. And we got together as collaborators, and he had already dug out a lot of these colonial era reports. So it wasn't long. You'll see in our first book, Out of the Shadows, we had 83 Yowie reports, not many by today's standards. That book came out in 1994. So we were happy enough with those reports. It proved to our satisfaction that the creatures weren't just some kind of spin-off from the Sasquatch. But we continued researching, and in our second book, The Yowie, we had 300 reports, but only 100 of those were pre-1975. So we had about 50 from the pure colonial era, 1788 to 1901, and then about another 50 for the decades from 1901 to 75. So we were happy with that. 300 reports, it did seem to prove something.
Yeah, that's
but we thought, I think I may have mentioned this to you, after that ordeal of putting that book together, and I know you must find it exhausting. Yes. You know what it's like when you finish a book, you think, never again, never again. East of Britain, no, I've done it. Don't want to know about it. We were saying we don't want to hear the word Yowie again, never again. That's our last word. But Paul couldn't help himself. He's a great researcher, and he just kept going through the old newspaper files, and people inspired by a book would contact us and say, oh, hey, our grandfather saw one of those.
Wow.
Or our father. Or in many cases, I saw one of those, So we thought, well, we're just going to have to come out with another book. And so we came out with the Yowie File.
Yeah.
And it was at first intended to be purely a source book, just a catalogue of cases with minimal linking text. And it was more or less supposed to be a free-floating appendix to the Yowie. the 2006 one. But we couldn't control ourselves. The linking testimony between some of these cases, the newly unearthed colonial era cases and the modern era cases that came from virtually the same spot, same side of the same mountain, 150 years apart. We had to point that out, we had to say, hey, go and look at case 271 or something, and you'll see the link. And we had to point out other things, these high strangeness details that I know are a bit disconcerting to some people.
Yeah.
But we had to say, well, for instance, it does seem strange that a lot of these reports, modern reports, obviously not colonial era reports, modern era reports, a significant number seem to occur right under electrical power lines or near electrical installations like microwave towers, or the creatures are attracted to fuse boxes on the side of houses, or they're seen in the middle of a lightning storm, and that electrical effect is also mentioned in some of the colonial era reports with respect to lightning storms. Some of the pioneers in a couple of areas said the hairy man, or the wild man of the woods, as they called it sometimes then, seems to appear during or after stormy weather. And some of the Aborigines on this side, the eastern side of the continent, say that, and some way up in the northwest, like 3,000 kilometres away, also say that. So I don't want to harp on that too much, but that's one of the high strangeness elements.
That's very interesting.
That we've noticed. And that electrical activity element is mentioned in some of these American books,
Yes.
like Tom Powell's book, and a few others. But anyway, be that as it may. So anyway, you're definitely letting me.
No, I am, but it's so it's so
you're
interesting that I didn't want to stop you.
Here, eh?
No, but I mean, I could sit back, Tony. I could let you talk for the entire hour. I'd be happy with that. But what you mentioned, what you mentioned about the electrical side of things actually put me onto something. In some of the UK reports, which are a lot more difficult to substantiate, famously lacking in provenance, but still, that electrical power lines aspect did come up several times. Not only that, but seen around old megaliths and dolmens and barrows.
Oh, yes.
Somebody suggested, could they be, in the same way as some of the big cats sometimes follow the railway lines, could these be markers, routes that they follow? I suppose a straight line is as straight as it's going to get with, in infrastructure and installation. Or could this electrical attraction be to do with this perceived ability to detect heat or thermal, I suppose, thermal infrared elements? I don't understand it personally myself. It's a bit of a stretch, but do they have that in common? I know that your yowie sometimes has these luminous eyes that are seen at night, luminous without an outside light source.
Yes.
Is this something to do with a type of visual superpower that they have? I don't know. What are your thoughts? I'm reaching, I'm stretching, but it just seems to be a link there somewhere.
Yeah, I really don't know. I mean, the Yowie phenomenon is a mystery wrapped in an enigma, wrapped in another mystery.
Yeah.
Same goes for your British Bigfoot and the Sasquatch. I mean, the glowing eyes, where many witnesses not all, but many say the eyes were glowing, but we didn't have a torch shining on the creature. The eyes seemed to be glowing brightly, as if lit from within. And you know that happens in North America too. But again, not all the time. I mean, quite often someone's got a great big spotlight right in one of these things' faces, and the eyes aren't reflecting, you know. And then there's a few reports where people see the eyes and then the eyes blink out, you know. Whether the creature literally blinks, I don't know. But they seem to be able to possibly turn it on or off. Well, I mean, why should they glow some of the time and in some instances not? I just don't know. But in a couple of our cases, motorbike engines have cut out when these creatures have been nearby too. With the riders saying, "Oh, I was surprised, I don't know why it cut out." There are a couple of American reports of them killing the motors of cars. So I don't know. As you may remember, I think I bored you silly with my paranormal
you didn't,
theory,
because
such as it is.
It's important because it's. I often think the paranormal side of things. It's in my usually, not always, but it's when it comes to animal-like creatures. In my opinion, it's a yet to be explained ability, and I always bring it back to the first man who dove below the ocean and suddenly witnessed an octopus not only take on the color of the rock or coral crop that it was on, but the shape of it at the same time. So somebody 400 years ago, that would have been inexplicable, a supernatural power we cannot explain by any modern scientific methods, and yet we know how they do it now. Very simple. We understand how it works. And could the Yowie, Yeren, Sasquatch, what was all these things, especially if they're nocturnal, have some ability to detect heat, or, as is often put forward with the infrasound, some kind of frequency that they're able to emit that's used for hunting prey and also has a detrimental effect upon electrical equipment? I'm preaching to the converted. I know you've already thought of this, but what's your opinion?
It could be, the ultra-low sound has been proven to discombobulate some humans, and make them hallucinate. And of course, it's been proven that tigers and some other big predators emit ultrasound, or what are they called?
Infrasound,
super low. So, and certainly there are some reports of yowies mesmerising wallabies, at least, some. I mean, one that I can think of particularly, where I interviewed the lady witness. She was looking out the back window of her house at 6 a.m. up at near where Gary Opert lives, up Mullumbimby Way, and she had an area of lawn and then the deep forest, and there was a little wallaby out there sitting rigidly, staring into the tree line, and she looked at it and looked away and looked back, and she thought, it's pretty strange. It's been there for about a minute, and then she saw something huge just over behind the first layer of shrubs in that tree line, some big, broad-shouldered thing with a head just crouched down. And she said it couldn't have been anything other than a yowie. It was so big. And this wallaby was looking straight in that direction. So I'd say that if it wasn't using infrasound?
Infrasound, infrasound. Yeah.
If it wasn't using infrasound, it was using telepathy or something. I mean, snakes supposedly can mesmerize rodents and so on, can't they? So I don't know. Some humans can mesmerize others. So,
Yeah,
but,
I'm sure that's in fact how I ended up getting married. Just I don't know what happened. We met, we had a drink. I was
I snapped
proposing.
out of it. I
Oh, you
said,
did.
Tony,
Oh,
wake
you
up, wake
broke
up.
the spell. You broke the spell. 3, 2, 1. And you're back in the
Um,
room again. Um,
yeah,
no, I mean, gosh, yeah, yeah, I can definitely believe in
uh,
that. Well, you can sometimes when you observe the predation of snakes upon small rodents, it does appear that either they mesmerize them or the rodents have some instinctive ability to keep still. Because if I don't move, it won't get me. So it's hard to decide which one that is, I suppose.
that's a
Um,
possibility, isn't it?
Perhaps
Yeah,
just
I don't
looking at
know,
it
but
is it keeps the animal
mm,
still enough for you to make a move.
yeah, yeah. But oh, I shouldn't flog this paranormal thing to death, but
No, it's
um,
fine.
there
Okay,
there are so many odd things about the Sasquatch. I think I mentioned this book last time. Have you
I
seen
I
where the footprints
recently
end?
interviewed Joshua about his new book, Fairies on Film, and he's a lovely guy. And
Fairies on
I
film.
Fairies on Film. Well, it's a contributor book. He's the editor, but it's
Uh-huh.
very very interesting. And where the footprints end, it's in my wish list. I haven't pressed purchase yet, to my regret, but it looks like a great book.
I think I should get it too because I'm a great admirer of
Mm,
these two books
yeah,
that Joshua wrote with Timothy Renner.
yeah.
Pretty freaky looking covers, aren't they?
I
But
love the covers. Yeah, they're
yeah,
fantastic covers.
but there's a lot of the paranormal, high strangeness elements that they mention in regard to mainly the Bigfoot are identical to what happens here.
Yeah.
The same with Tom Powell's book, the locals. You see all these tags. Um, he doesn't have an index, I think. Oh yes, he does. But anyway, I tagged everything in
Oh
here
wow. Oh, look at that.
rang a big bell. These everything there rang a really big bell
Yeah.
in
I just have to
respect of
explain if anybody's
the
listening and not
yowie.
watching the podcast and listening, that Tony
Oh,
has a book that has about 100 tags
well,
inside of the
there'd be 40 or 50. Yeah.
wow. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
called The Locals by Tom Powell. He's a
Fantastic.
retired school teacher,
Mm.
and he was with the what was it? The BFRO, you know, the Bigfoot
Oh yes, yeah. The BFRO.
and
Yeah.
yeah, they're uh, he had to eventually sort of go freelance because he said that he could no longer ignore the
Mm.
high strangeness elements to the Bigfoot phenomenon, and the BFRO, their doctrine or whatever it
Yeah.
is that no, these things have got to be flesh and blood.
That's
So
the divide. Yeah. In the community. Yeah.
he didn't want to get into great shouting matches with
Mm.
his old friends. So he went out alone. But the all of these things that I have tagged here have occurred in Australia with the Yowie too.
Wow.
It's
I'm sure. I
but
mean, if you looked again, the British Bigfoot sightings are famously lacking in provenance once again. But um, despite that, I do know several witnesses here who I wholeheartedly believe. And yet, within some of those reports, the things that you're talking about come up again and again. I wonder if the problem between the flesh and blood camp and the woo, as we call it, the paranormal, the paranormal, the woosters, the paranormal believers, is that each each is, I suppose, ideologically possessed with a sort of a right left paradigm. Perhaps the reality is that they are flesh and blood creatures that have what appear to be supernatural abilities. And because we either believe that supernatural abilities makes a supernatural animal, or flesh and blood abilities makes a flesh and blood animal. We can't join these things together and say, could it just be a creature that we don't understand at this time? And could we join together on that?
Yeah, I like that term. Was it the woozies?
The woo, WOO, the woo. I only call them the woosters as a plural, but I don't think that's a general term. It's called the woo. Are you flesh and blood, or are you part of the woo?
Oh, put me down as a woo
Yeah,
with a capital W. Yeah, but I mean, the thing is, see, if we were only dealing with big hairy, if the only big hairy ape man reports in the world came from the heavily forested parts of northern western Canada, okay, we could say, well, these apparent paranormal elements, yes, they might be explainable in some way, but you know, there are scores of these elements. I mean, there's dozens and dozens of ways in which these things are they exhibit high strangeness. But the thing that is the clincher with me is that here in Australia we have effectively exactly the same thing as the Canadian Sasquatch. They look the same, they act the same, they mesmerise animals, their eyes glow or don't glow, depending on how they're feeling. And it's effectively the same phenomenon. So how in God's name can we have them in every state and territory of Australia and in every province of Canada and every state of the USA? And then, of course, possibly, some of those British reports read pretty well to me.
They do. I mean, some of them are very, as I always like to put it, have lots of good mundane facts about them. Some good mundane, non-essential storytelling that says this is something that happened to me, and every time I retell the story, I have to mention that I noticed the street light was out, or it was it had been a sunny day. It doesn't matter to the report. Makes no difference. But it's in the I would call it the PTSD part of their experience that they can't forget. So it appears in the retelling. I've got several stories just like that say to me, this person experienced this. Whether true or not, they believe it happened wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
And I can definitely go for those. And we do have room. I keep telling people, only 6.8% of the entire landmass is urban sprawl, including roads and motorways. And when you get out, like I do all the time, you don't see anybody. It's just rolling hills, fields, and forests, and blackness everywhere.
Yes,
after dark.
That struck me when I had my first good look for the British alien big cats.
Yes.
I thought, holy hell! I thought, well, these days most farms have only got one guy or one woman operating them, whereas years ago they'd have half a dozen, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
And a lot of the villages now are depopulated. I saw all those hedgerows. I'd never focused on them before. I thought, geez, some of these, the hedges are about 20 feet tall or even taller.
Yeah.
And you can hardly push through them.
Yeah.
So I thought, there is plenty of room for escaped leopards or cougars here. The big question is how come nobody shot one dead? I think it's possible. I mean, it's almost plausible that there could be populations of black leopards and cougars running around in the UK. But Bigfoot, no.
It's a stretch. It's a big stretch. Admittedly. Yeah.
But, I may have mentioned this to you. I tend to repeat my stories. The first time I went to Loch Ness, I pulled up at a service station. I think there used to be a service station, a pump anyway, at the Klansman, where the Klansman Hotel is now. And pulled up, idiot, sort of 22-year-old or something. and this old dour Scott guy is filling the tank, and so I, like an idiot, I said, has anyone seen the monster lately? And he didn't even deign to look at me. He said, how can you see what is not there? I said, oh, right. Then later on, I thought, silly old bugger. He ought to read Constance White's book.
Yeah.
But the thing is, after 50 years of searching for all these things, you can see what isn't there.
Yes.
Because,
of course you can.
I mean, I believe that the Yowie creatures and the Bigfoot creatures are here some of the time.
Okay.
And then somehow or other, they just whoosh, or woo woo, as you might say, and they're not there. And they can't be killed. They can't be tracked. They can't be photographed properly. Yet people definitely see them. So yes, you can see what isn't there. Same with the lake monsters.
I would support that in at least in one way. I think on some of the recent documentary I'm working on with some friends, it's not just about cryptozoology. It's about all different types of strangeness, high strangeness around Britain and different things.
Well,
Black shark and different things. But the woodwose obviously comes into it. And when I wrote Beasts of Britain, the sort of a background to the British Bigfoot, I thought the woodwose was an important element of that. Not only not essentially as a proof that it exists, but that there's something in the cultural inherited makeup of the people here that they could interpret or misinterpret as a hairy man in the forest, because it's on our cathedrals and on the tapestries. And I've been to so many places where there's, 1,000-year-old effigy, carving, misericord, tapestry in some cases of a hairy man. And could this be the god Sylvanus or some, bastardized version of it, or even when you see the club, a reinterpretation of Heracles, the northern and western parts of Europe. Hercules, the hero, this big, muscular, hirsute man who wielded that club and achieved all of those many wonders, in the Greek myths. We are, many of our cultural artifacts are also artifacts themselves of the older empires and civilizations, like the Greeks, like the Romans too. So who's to say where we got it from, or where we got that mental image in our library to pluck out that image of the woodwose or the hairy man. So it's a tough one. I'd say if they were an intelligent animal like the yowie, that they could still live here in small, very small numbers. But I rather think it's more likely that it's a cultural hangover of something that possibly once was here a long time ago. Even the medieval depictions are a golden age interpretation of what was told to people and not seen. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, of course, Neanderthals lived all over Western Europe for a hell of a lot longer than we have.
Yes.
They were there for 500,000 years, weren't they, the Neanderthal?
Something
it took Homo sapiens a good, 100,000 years odd to wipe them out or to absorb them. So who's to say? Nobody really knows if the Neanderthals were hair covered or not.
No,
they may well have been, because they were in Western Europe during the Ice Ages and so on. So it could be the woodwose is a collective memory, genetic memory, or what have you, of the Neanderthals. Here in Australia, well, there's no evidence that any primitive hominids got to Australia before the Aborigines. A lot of people speculate that they did. A lot of people who are in a position to make educated guesses, like the guy whose name I forget, one of the guys who discovered Homo floresiensis, the little hobbit human creatures of the Flores. He said, I bet they got to Australia. I bet they did. And Homo erectus got to Flores as well. So, why couldn't they have got to Australia? I think it's now accepted that the Denisovans, who were only sort of discovered just, 8-10 years ago, they apparently got to New Guinea. So some of them could have got to Australia. Whether they were hair covered, I don't know. They weren't 8 feet tall like yowies.
That's the issue.
That height. Yeah, but Hey, incidentally, I don't know how good the camera is on your thing here, but can you see
I can see a little
mate across the room there?
Could you see that? Yeah, I can see him fully. Oh, look at that.
I'm
always confused about this. Do they say Janjari or Janjari, or is it just the variations of the same name?
The terms vary a bit. Probably both of those pronunciations are all right. Junjadi is the one that seems to be most common, but there are dozens of different names, Aboriginal names for these creatures. And when Paul Cropper and I wrote or published 2006 book, The Yowie, a girlfriend of mine was, she still is a very good maker of teddy bears. And I said to her, I don't suppose you could make an 8-foot tall yowie for me, could you? And she said, if you want an 8-foot tall yowie, you're going to have to make it yourself. But she said, I'll make a small one for you. And she made it.
I love it.
My mate over there.
Yeah.
But isn't it amazing that the creatures that lived on Flores, the Homo floresiensis, they were human, but they were only that tall. I'll go over and stand beside the thing.
Yeah, show us. Okay, so look at that. You're about 3 feet taller than that. Yeah. Wow. Look at that. What a great model.
And if the Junjadis exist, which a lot of Aborigines, many Aborigines insist that they do, and in our book here we've got a few sightings by non-Aboriginal people. If the Junjadis exist, they're about that size. In fact, I on one trip up to Queensland, put that little mannequin in the passenger seat of my vehicle, sitting up on a cushion, and I'd freak people out, drive up alongside their car on the highway and press the automatic thing for the window to go down and keep you looking out with the hair going, and you get these double takes. But
leaving a trail of insurance claims in your wake as you drive across country.
One thing an incident I feel really quite guilty about, and that's seriously, is he was sitting in the passenger seat of the vehicle. I drove into a service station up the coast and filled up the gas, and this Aboriginal woman came out of the service station, and I had the passenger side door open, and she looked at him in amazement and ran, didn't run, but walked very quickly around the corner, and I heard her yelling out to someone. And so I looked around, there was a family, a group of Aboriginal people there.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, oh, shit. And so I filled up with petrol. I drove over. I should have just driven off. I mean, she must have known that it was stuffed. But nevertheless, it got her really excited. I drove over and they were all like this. And
I don't suppose they thought it was a stuffed, real stuffed Junjadi.
I don't think so. No. Well, initially maybe.
Perhaps
she might have originally.
First look,
but anyway, I said, oh, I should introduce you to my little friend here, little hairy man. Anyway, I felt bad about it because obviously the law of the Junjidi, the little hairy man, means a lot to Aboriginal
Okay.
people, and I knew that from talking to an Aboriginal elder
Is
on a
it
previous
unlucky to
trip.
see one in the Aboriginal law? I forget.
In some areas, it
Okay.
is.
Yeah.
It's unlucky to see the big guys
Okay.
in some areas. In some areas, the Aboriginal people say that little fellows will help you
Mm,
if a child's in trouble or
okay.
a child's ill, they'll help. But um, other people see that Australia's a big country with
Mm,
many Aboriginal
yeah.
groups and languages. Some say the little ones are quite evil and mischievous.
Mm,
Others say they're good. Some say the big guys are really dangerous. Others say, oh no, they're really
okay.
quite good. So you see, I think maybe that even Aboriginal people don't see these things all the time,
Mm,
and there must
no.
be an element of mystery and confusion even in the minds of many Aboriginal people about them. But yeah, I'm going to take this little guy up north again. I've got to go up to Queensland in late September,
Uh-huh.
and no, September, October. I'm going to drop in and see Gary Opert at
Oh, that would be great. I
Mullumbimby.
love Gary.
Yeah,
It's awesome.
yeah.
Yeah.
He's he's always got something going on,
Yeah.
and I'll see Dean Harrison at the Gold Coast, and
Those
then
guys, their work is just astonishing. Every time I tune into their show or check out their page, they're doing something groundbreaking every time. It's amazing.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, particularly Dean. Yeah,
Yeah. The Yowie Hunters
he
guys. Yeah.
really.
Mm,
I thought Dean was going to run out of energy years ago
mm,
because it's quite intense.
mm.
It's quite a job for him to attempt to keep on top of all the information that comes in his
Yeah.
website. Or if any of the listeners don't know about him, it's what is it? YowieHunters.com.
Yeah. Yeah. They
Yeah,
have great YouTube spot as well where they interview witnesses, don't they?
yeah,
The Yowie
yeah.
Hunters podcast. And what I love about the Australian witnesses, and no offense to my American friends, sometimes with the American witnesses, I think it's in their nature they spin the yarn and they tell the story, whereas Australians it's very similar. You just get the plain facts of what happened step by step. There's no build up. The story starts straight away. You get the description, you get the details, and out. And that's what a researcher wants to hear. So
Yeah,
every time I
yeah.
tune into Yowie Hunters, I'm like, okay, I'm going to get a good they're going to get a good, down to earth Aussie description of a Yowie encounter now. And that's what I'm looking forward to.
There's some classic stuff on
Mm,
his website and yeah, and his podcast. But yeah, he's good, and so I'll meet him again up there, and then I'm going on to Gympie
mm.
in southeast Queensland. Uh, our book features our book, our books
Okay.
features
We'll do a double
two or
view.
three two or three of the cases feature a guy that we call a retired New South Wales policeman,
Uh-huh.
and in fact well, it's not giving too much away. He's a Queensland policeman and he's still
Uh-huh.
serving.
Okay.
Uh, you know, he's, but I certainly won't give you his name, but he he's invited me to stay on his farm,
Wow.
or bush block up there for a little while. So I'll be catching up with him. But yeah,
And
he's seen a couple of,
he's
yeah.
getting activity on the farm there? He's having sightings, his property?
He said it's a fairly active area.
Mm.
He hasn't seen anything there, but there's reports from the area. He saw uh, a a yowie or two actually uh, down at the hell's the name of the place? I having a senior's moment. It's not far from Gympie anyway, but he was with Dan Harrison on one occasion. They saw a yowie, and he was on the same stretch of the same track alone, and he saw another one. He's seen eye shine in the way down the Blue Mountains too when he was a New South Wales cop. But anyway, so this time around, yeah, I'll be catching up with those guys, and who knows, my luck might change. Perhaps if I leave my yowie repellent camera at home, I might see one.
Or just take one that's not digital. And I wondered about that before. It would be easier to capture one of these things on an old analog camera, because you wouldn't have all of the signals, and if they can detect that, it's a theory, I know. If they can detect it, why not just get yourself an old analog camera with some film in it, and see if you can get lucky.
Yeah, I have carried both at times, but that was a few years ago. Can you still get the film? Can you? I suppose you can.
Yeah, I think you can still get film. Yeah, I mean, it's more expensive than it ever was before, because it's a special thing now, isn't it? Then you've got to get somebody to develop it. But I mean, you could even do it yourself with the fluids if you wanted, I suppose. It's not too difficult. If you want to go into all of that nonsense and setting up the darkroom, I guess it's a bit of a headache. I wanted to ask you a question actually about corroboration between links between little people or little hairy men reports around the world to be more accurate. The Janjadi, I was talking to Cambridge professor Chivers yesterday, and he was examining some orang pendek prints, and of course he famously set up one of the orang pendek expeditions in the early noughties, where several of his team witnessed the creature and collected evidence. He's a primatologist, 40 something years experience, and I was asking him, did you think that this orang pendek could be an unknown form of gibbon of some kind, like an outsized subspecies, maybe of Semang or lar gibbon? And he said it was possible, but it would be a new species. And then I asked him, could this relate to the Australian Junjidi, perhaps? Because I recalled one of Gary Opit's daughter and son-in-law's encounter with a Nimbinji, the regional variation, in 2020. And they said it was sort of in the trees, but hollering like a gibbon, almost making noises like a gibbon, and about 1.5 meters tall. And I think his son-in-law was an artist. The picture he drew of it seemed very gibbon-like. Do you think there could be a link between these creatures?
Well, I don't know, but as far as I know, in our files, it's only a minority of cases where these things are in trees. They're usually bipedal, standing quite straight up. They're tailless. And they run on all fours. Run on their hind legs. So I don't know. I haven't seen that. When I see Gary, I'm going to have to have a look at that sketch. The 2020, was it?
2020,
or thereabouts.
I think, Christmas around that time during a visit. I think that's the only story in trees I've ever heard of. Of course, most gibbons would be terrestrial, I suppose. Well, many gibbons would be terrestrial, not all. To correct that, the orang pendek, most orang pendek reports are terrestrial, gibbons not. And that would fall in line with most Junjidi reports as well. But you've got these other little people reports around the world. So, for example, in the Beasts of Britain book, there's a little chapter called "The Little People or the Hairy Fairy Folk." I wondered if these old fairy legends, as you mentioned, some of the Aborigines saying these little hairy men helping people sometimes, or doing housework and chores for porridge or milk or cream, could those be archaic memories of a similar creature that once existed around the world and now lives in small patches in Sumatra, Australia, etc.?
I don't know, but
and he's really stretching today.
Certainly, yeah, but yeah, certainly some of those elements,
Yeah.
the helpful little person elements of the Junjidi story are highly reminiscent of European fairy lore.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
very reminiscent, and the Aborigines, some of them seem to attribute, fairy-like qualities to the Junjidi. Excuse me. And some of them say the old initiated men of the tribe can speak to them communicate with them.
Oh,
I don't
wow.
know whether they have
Okay.
very deep and meaningful conversations, but excuse me.
Okay.
So it's a bit hard to say, but certainly the little hairy man type appears all over the world. I may have mentioned that I went to Fiji for only about 10 days one time. I stopped over there and investigated an episode where some little 2 foot tall, glowing eyed, hair covered men had been encountered by school children at Latoka in Fiji. And they ran to a hole in the ground, jumped in, and disappeared.
Wow.
Anyway, the headmaster who I talked to, he said he believed them, and he was Indian by ethnicity. The kids were most of them were Fijian, Melanesian, but there were Indian kids as well, and all the villagers from all around the place got very excited. The local term for these little creatures is leka, Leka, and so some of the villagers filled in the hole with rocks. Unfortunately, it wasn't very deep anyway, but about 8 feet down, and there was a possible side cavern tunnel. But certainly that was a fairy-like story. The only kid that I managed to talk to who had been present, he was so shy that I could get virtually nothing out of him.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether he regretted sort of making it up or whether he was just shy, I think.
Have some strange man from an unfamiliar culture turns up one day and has very peculiar questions to ask about your sighting, and it's a bit nerve-wracking for a child.
Sure, yeah. I tend to believe they saw them. I mean, English children see fairies, and Australian Aboriginal people see Junjidis. Some of them seem perhaps to be more physically real than others. Like the British fairies don't hang around for very long, do they?
No.
Usually, as soon as you turn away, they're gone. But the Junjidis stay in sight, sometimes minutes on end. I don't know.
Just a question about that. Actually, talking about European fairy lore, British fairy lore, I suppose, in this instance, it sort of stands out to me that in Central and South America, their little person, or one of the most famous little people types, is the duende, and of course that also exists in Spain and Portugal. Its origination point, and I always wondered with the colonists going around the country and meeting people from Australia, from the Americas, and all the other places that we went, how much of our folklore was passed on to those people? How much did they imbibe and then perhaps later believe to be part of their own tradition? Could some of what we're seeing be that, as in the duende, for example? Now, most duende reports come all from Central and South America, not Spain and Portugal at all. It comes from the colony. And could we be witnessing something like that in North America and also in Australia and some of these other places? Or is it just possible that these stories exist all around the world, and some of what we're experiencing are the Aboriginal peoples of Australia or wherever else reinterpreting their stories in our own terms so we understand them?
Yeah, well, certainly it has been suggested. Well, Graham Joyner, for instance, who was an early Yowie researcher, he has said that, well, at some stage he believed that it was possible that the Australian Aborigines were influenced by British people coming here and talking about the woodlouse, you know,
Yes.
the wild man of the woods in Europe, and referring to the Yahoo out of Gulliver's Travels. But certainly, in some of the very earliest European reports we have, people, the British pioneers refer to the Australian hairy man as the wild man of the woods. You know, just as the people in Europe used to refer to the wild men there. Graham Joyner points out that in Gulliver's Travels, Gulliver is marooned on an island where there are Yowie-like creatures, except they have tails. They're very uncouth, monkey-like, half monkey, half human, and they're called yahoos. Well, when the earliest British settlers were interviewing Aborigines about the hairy man in Australia, they said that the Aborigines called these creatures yahoos. Some of the Aborigines used the term yahoo. Well, to my mind, it could have been a genuine Aboriginal term, and it's just a coincidence that Jonathan Swift used that term in Gulliver's Travels, because it's only 2 syllables after all, and yahoo is a word that's not that, doesn't sound that much different from yowie or yaroo or yourie, which are different words, or wawee, which are genuine Aboriginal terms. So I think it's just a coincidence. But it is weird. I mean, well, it's a weird coincidence that Jonathan Swift set that island in Gulliver's Travels, where Gulliver got marooned. He placed it just off the South Australian coast.
Wow.
Near where the town of Eucla is now. And he wrote that book in 1726, long before James Cook mapped the east coast of Australia.
Wow.
So in Jonathan Swift's day, in Gulliver's day, that point on the South Australian coast was the absolute limit of the known world. And I guess that's why Jonathan Swift said, well, there's Isle of the Winhams, where Gulliver got shipwrecked and met these yahoos, these ape men. It was at the very extremity of the known world. But it is pretty weird that, I mean, it's a good coincidence that there you have Gulliver meeting these uncouth yahoos. And then the Aborigines calling the hairy man yahoos in Southeast Australia.
I wonder, what is there any possibility that any of the sailors or the settlers who first started to occupy that part of Australia would have had this book, would have kept it, would have had this reference with them at any point? It's it's curious to me that there must be an unknown, unrecorded dropping off point for this legend to enter the country. I think that the Yowie is theirs, the Aboriginals. I think it's, but some, as you mentioned, the Yahoo, that the possibility that some of its interpretation, at least so that we understand it, is taken from our own vernacular, is strong. That's what I'm proposing, I guess.
Yeah, well, could be. The whole thing, the Yowie mystery is just a mystery wrapped in an enigma, wrapped in another mystery. You know? There's all so many elements to it, but it's certainly fascinating, and it's very difficult to let go of. You know, as I said, after 2006, when we wrote the preceding book to this, we said that's it. Don't want to hear the word Yowie again. Don't talk to me about hairy ape men. But you know, we're still chasing the damn things. Perhaps not as fleet-footedly as we used to. I went out to an area on the river here just recently with a guy who reckons he's had an encounter out there, but it's the Murrumbidgee River. It's possible. It's just upstream from where one was definitely seen in the 1980s, and where one was supposedly killed by Aborigines in 1847. The place is also infested with black panthers out there. Well, that is to say, there's been several reports along that stretch of river. So it could be, but no, this trip to Queensland in September will be the first proper, well, it's not an expedition, but I'll be doing a bit of, I'll be out in the bush. I'll take the plaster of Paris. I'll take the cameras. I'll have the dash cam going, you know, in case one decides to do the run across the road.
Fantastic.
Act. Yeah. So what's your next expedition, or you make a film? You were saying
we're making a documentary. It's called Weird Britain, and it features all kinds of things. There is a little bit of cryptozoology in it, but most of the items are outside of my normal comfort zone. So it's good for me in a sense because I can go in objectively and just interview the adherents or the curious people that have taken on these interests. And just like ourselves, you know, I always say that I used to say that one man's Bigfoot is another man's werewolf and vice versa, you know. One man's Nessie is another man's, you know, UFOs. What seems strange to us also from somebody else's perspective, it seems strange to the outside world, and we're all weird in some way. So it's an interesting series. But we will be, I think we will be going to a few cryptozoological sites as well. Right. We recently in Bungay to investigate the 1577 attack of the Black Shuck. And we went to all
the
of the
black
churches.
Dog. Oh, wow. I got to get one of those mugs. Was that Bungay? Yeah.
Oh, you were? Oh, wow.
Okay. Yeah, but they didn't have any merch.
Well, this is because there's a new festival that happens every year. And this is the second year of it. And they set up a black shop just for the week of the festival, Black Shuck Shop. And so we interviewed a chap there who, I'll send you a picture of it, who actually dressed as the Black Shuck and gave a very theatrical performance in the Church of Bungay, which was, the whole thing with well, that's Blythburgh with the scorched rocks. That's the second location with the steeple clap. So we've done Blythburgh, but we also investigated Aston Abbey, where that 7-foot-long canine skeleton was uncovered by archaeologists about 3 years ago. And so...
I didn't know about that.
Yes, they discovered the 7-foot-long skeleton of a canine buried underneath the abbey in the grounds, because it's a ruin, it's a wreck. It was destroyed, or I suppose it was ended by Henry VIII because he wanted to get rid of all the Catholic monks and take their land. And the locals started taking, you know, stones away, and now it's a ruin. And archaeologists were given permission to dig there for artifacts. I think it was 2017 or 18. They uncovered. I'll send you a link to the story. The 7-foot skeleton of a canine, which is in
I
the
suppose
area.
a really, really big dog from the nose to the tip of the tail. Yeah, I suppose a pretty bloody big dog, though, isn't it?
So, maybe a large Irish wolfhound or something like that.
Yeah.
Nice big long
Still an
tail.
interesting. So, do you know if there's any black dog stories attached to that ruin or that?
Not to the ruin, but it would make sense. And the ruin, I mean, the abbey would have been in by the time 1577. It was still in use. It was still in active use, as far as I'm aware. Or it would have been at least. It would have at least been a solid structure when it been demolished at that point.
Yeah.
And perhaps if there was some animal, it could have been buried beneath, or perhaps a large dog died, and in memoriam of this legend or some guard against evil, it was buried in church grounds, holy ground. That would seem to be the only thing that would make sense. You bury something evil in holy ground, so it can't leave again, come back to life.
Wasn't a stake through its heart or anything.
Next to the heart, garlic pizza,
So how far from Bungay is that?
It's about 5 miles, 5 or 6 miles. It's
so it's close.
I'll send it to you. It's an interesting story because I suppose it's got such a great connection to the original legend. I would have been. So what's the name of the place again? Leiston Abbey. I'll send you
Easton.
Leiston, Leiston.
Leiston Abbey.
I'll send you links to the articles and the locale, and I'll email it all to you.
Oh, great!
So you can see it.
I'd love to get back to the UK.
I should.
But God, I tell you what, I'm feeling it. My age, though, mate, I really am.
How old are you, Tony?
Well, I'm 78.
Okay. So you're getting up
I'm
there.
not one of these. Not one of these 78-year-old guys who runs double marathons either.
I can suddenly. They were in the died suddenly crew anyway. The marathon guys. They look bright as rain, and next day they're just gone, aren't they?
But I think I could handle the UK. I still hike, every couple of times a week with mates, and but I noticed this morning. I don't know what it was. I must have slept badly. Went for a 50-minute walk around here, and I was just, oh God, when can I get home and put my feet up? But it's okay. But anyway, the UK, lovely place.
Yeah,
and there's something fascinating about it around every corner. Wow, look at this. Wait until you get to Australia, you'll think, geez, pretty dull place. We don't have much in the way of
the wildlife from that perspective. I think, but of course, even though there's not, I suppose, the same ancient architectural infrastructure with the Aboriginal people, there's a lot of lore to learn, and that's a nice aspect to get hold of people. And I don't think you have to leave your buildings and ruins to make a contribution. You can still have it, in years of people. I love Europe for that reason. I've so big on history. I can't live in a new house. In our house, which I don't consider to be particularly old, is from 1866, and it just has to be. I think the one I grew up in was from the 1700s, and even then, you can buy houses here from the 1500s or 1400s. And it just, I think, house for me, it just feels it needs to be lived in to be comfortable. I don't know what it is. I can't get used to it. And when I feel old things, to put my hand on them or I'm near them, it feels solid. It feels good.
Tons of character. Yes, they somehow absorb. I don't know, something from everyone who's been in the house, and this house, nobody's lived here other than my family. We built it in 1986.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, it's okay. It's not too bad. But
it looks very nice and spacious.
The old dart. Yeah, it's not too bad. It's warm. We had -5 degrees.
Really?
Celsius. Yeah. Celsius
We
this
work in
morning.
Celsius too, by the way. Never
Oh,
Fahrenheit.
oh,
Yeah.
I do get a bit confused. Do you still have miles though, don't you?
We just still have
Or do you?
miles and Celsius. So Celsius and miles. Liters for bottles, but pints for alcoholic drinks.
Oh,
So
gosh, I
it's
should
this
think so.
weird with pounds and ounces, but you can also have grams for certain things. If you go to um, if you go to a grocer, like a street grocer, you might buy a kilo of something, but you can also ask for a
Yeah,
few pounds of potatoes or
yeah,
yeah, it's weird, and it's weird the crossover. And I said we're
yeah,
living in this imperial and metric sort of
yeah.
meld.
So like, well, at least you're sort of heading towards the future slowly. The poor old Yanks are still stuck with inches and the carpenters are still working with 5/16ths of an inch.
Yeah,
Everything else.
we do that too. We work in inches and
Yeah,
feet. Yeah,
good God.
inches, feet,
Yeah,
yards, miles. It's just the weights and measures which seem to have weights and
yeah.
measures and volume seems to have a sort of a crossover. Gallons
Oh,
for
yeah.
petrol,
Look,
gallons for petrol, but
gallons. Oh,
gallons,
well.
but it's price per liter on the board. You get this weird crossover.
God. Yeah. Well, look,
Yeah,
we're a bit schizo here too.
yeah,
I still think, people of my generation talk about someone being, 6'1" tall or
yeah,
5'6" tall or something.
yeah,
And uh, I think in this book we didn't convert. If any of the witnesses said
yeah.
thing was 200
2 meters
yards away,
or
we
yeah,
just left it.
okay, yeah.
We just left it as
Oh,
that.
really? Okay.
If they said meters, okay. But it's notable that the heights that they estimate, they almost always say 8 feet or 7 feet or 6 feet.
Same. Yeah.
They don't say 2.01
No,
meters.
no.
Occasionally, younger people, the millenniums or whatever they are, they say, oh, it was over 2 meters tall. But uh,
Yeah.
anyway,
It's a strange thing.
uh,
Look, I'm with you all the way. In all of my books, unless the witness explicitly uses meters and centimeters, I report feet and inches all the way because
yeah,
I don't know what it is. Um, I like it. I don't think there's any reason for us to use it. It's almost like culturally characteristic of who we are. We don't need to. We
yeah,
understand meters, and so that's fine.
mm,
But let's just keep a little something on what we have. That makes us us.
yeah,
And it's
yeah,
who knows? Who knows?
yeah.
Tony, I should let you go because I know you probably got stuff to get on with, and I've just got two homeschool children down there waiting to do their Sunday lessons.
Oh my
And
God, really?
we
Oh,
homeschool both our kids, yeah. So we have since
oh, good on you.
2020, and
Yeah,
yeah,
wow.
it's going well. But
Geez.
they need a bit more discipline because that's too soft.
Uh, yeah. Oh, good luck to you. Yeah. Anyway, it's always a pleasure talking to you, mate.
Yeah.
You're a good fun.
Well, look,
So,
I'll email that stuff across the Leiston Abbey and all the details of
oh
the
yeah,
sighting. I think you
yeah.
enjoy it.
Thanks.
Yeah,
I'll get out my highlighter and
yeah,
highlight the town. Next
yeah.
time, I'll go back to Bungay and the area. But yeah,
Beautiful area.
at the
Beautiful.
moment, my travel plans are stuck to that fridge over there with a magnet, in the form
Okay.
of a lottery ticket.
Okay.
Although I could raid the superannuation.
Well,
Just
I
depends
suppose.
going.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's
Yeah.
make it worth your while. You work out a great trip. I'm sure you'll go to Loch Ness and Morar again and all these places.
Oh,
And
I'd love to.
yeah,
I'd love to. I'd love
yeah.
to go back to Lake Bala as well. I
Shaggy,
noticed you yeah, you got some
the
nice reports from Bala
yeah.
in here.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
Lynn Teggett, that's the Welsh name,
Thin
isn't it, of
Teggett.
the lake?
Yeah, Thin Teggett.
Lynn
Yeah,
Teggett, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, there's some great stories in here. God, it's
Oh, thank you.
jam-packed.
Wait,
So
that
what a
book
weird.
is the third version, and the second version, I wasn't happy with it again because I've never written a book, and I just thought, okay, make it. This is the last version. Make it the way you want it this time. So I took
Yeah.
130 pages out, put 160 new ones in, different to the
Yeah.
second version. Yeah, I
Oh
thought, okay,
God,
that's it
right.
now. it's probably only got 100 typos in there. That'll do.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It came up really well. Came up well,
Oh, thank you.
There's typos in here. I don't know whether you noticed one flaw in this book is that the same photograph is duplicated. It's in the Rillaman case that Gary Opert, when was it, 2011, I think?
What page is that?
I think it's 2011. Yeah. On page 244, we've got a picture of Gorilla Man Falls.
244. Yeah, Gorilla Man Falls. Yeah, I see it.
And then on 2 pages earlier, on page 241, there's the same photograph.
Oh well,
Yeah, what a bummer.
Well, once
book
it's done,
designer,
it's done, isn't it?
Yeah, book designer got confused. There was a nice photograph of one of the witnesses, or the key witness, actually. So it's a bit of a shame. But anyway, yeah, Gary Opert was very generous sharing all that with us.
All the stuff is just, I can't get past it. Like, Gary, do you know anything about X? And then like 4 pages of material going across.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you very much. That will keep me going for a while. The book you've got there, I realized recently, because I had copies of the book, but I never really looked in detail. Some of the photos were really dark. I got the publishing company to lighten them up. I don't know how they obviously didn't proof the copy when they printed it first. And I don't know if it's the same in your copy, but now I've changed it. That some of the darker photos you can see quite well, but 1 or 2 of them just look like black squares. So anyway, you find out these things after the fact normally, don't you? And
yes. But anyway, no, you should be proud of your books. They're great.
Thank you.
A witness described the heavens high 7 foot tall figure. Ooh.
The woo statue.
I'll use that as my bedtime reading tonight and scare the hell out of myself.
Don't do that.
But anyway, Andy, well, it was great talking to you again.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks for allowing us to plug the book.
Well, it'll be on the page again, and I mean these are my go-to books. Honestly, it's very genuine respect, and it's good to make the friendship. I do really appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries at all, and get yourself out here to Australia. We'll get together, and for instance, if you were coming in September, I could show you some of the territory up there.
Oh, I would love that. It's probably unlikely, but maybe if the Weird Britain series goes well, because it's going to be on TV. We were planning weird other places, so maybe a weird Australia could be on the cards. Yeah. We'll take Tony up to the Northern Territory and sort of dig in. It's a very respectful series, by the way. It's about looking at what people are into, but it's never sort of in a sort of look at these guys. It's a very nice look at what people like.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Anyway, I should jump off. British people can't end conversations.
Okay,
I'll go.
Good luck with the homeschooling. Yeah.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
See you next time, Andy.
See ya.
See you later.